And joining us now to discuss the latest in trilateral peace talks between Russia and Ukraine is national security analyst Rebecca Grant, who's also vice president of the Lexington Institute. Good to have you with us this morning. Rebecca, Russia and Ukraine, as we just heard, had each agreed to exchange 157 prisoners just yesterday. How much does this go towards peace efforts more broadly?
Well, I'm certainly glad to see the Ukrainian prisoners coming home, but we can't read too much into this. It's a little bit of a sign of goodwill from Putin to President Trump and to our other emissaries there. But we are also hearing a lot coming out of Abu Dhabi from the Russians of complaints about security guarantees for Ukraine, complaints about EU access, a lot of detailed nitpicking that tells me that Russia still is really digging in their heels and not willing to concede on some major issues. So I'm afraid that team is making progress, but they have a lot of work to do even to get to a ceasefire.
And just as of yesterday, we also just heard Russia and the U.S. no longer have a legally binding nuclear arms control treaty. How does that play into the talks and the peace efforts right now?
Right, and we saw that one coming. Again, we've got our NATO commander there, a U.S. Air Force General Alex Grinkovich, also known as Grinch from his days as an F-22 pilot. It looks to me like he's been instrumental in getting the military to military communications restored between the U.S. and Russia. There was a pretty long, extensive history of them exchanging some communications over hotspots in the world. But as for this treaty, apparently they are discussing it on the sidelines in Abu Dhabi. But the big problem with this treaty, in a way, is not really Russia, although they've been violating the treaty for quite some time. It's actually China, because China is the one increasing its nuclear arsenal from about 300 warheads up to 600 now, on track to go to 1,000 and then up to 1,500, which is where that old New START treaty limit put the U.S. and Russia. I think President Trump wants to get back into arms control, but he wants China to be a part of the picture as well.
And what will that take?
Almost impossible to say, because China has just flat out refused to participate in arms control at all. So there they are, opening up plutonium reprocessing, building warheads faster than anybody else on the planet, and they don't even want to talk about arms control. Now, I wouldn't mind seeing the U.S. and Russia work on an outline that would extend New START, but it's got to be in ways that are okay for the U.S. arsenal as well, because, now, unlike in the Obama years, we are facing really two large nuclear armed powers, not just Russia, but now an ascendant China as well. And that really complicates the U.S.-Russia piece of the negotiation, too.
And how much do you see China playing into Russia's ongoing assaults here? They've kept up their assaults despite peace efforts, which makes them look pretty insincere in those efforts. At the same time, China has its own plans and kind of wants to destabilize the U.S. And drain it of resources. So do you see this kind of just going on, driven by China's efforts there on the nuclear front?
Oh, 100%. And sad to say, but the longer the Ukraine war goes on, the better that suits China. They're happy to see Russia using its military strength, taking all those casualties, and then the destabilization for the U.S. as well, and for the whole world. And China, of course, is the whole reason that Putin was able to go on Ukraine in the first place. China keeps them in business with the energy purchases, buying almost half of Russia's oil, and even supplying defense electronics that are used to make the drones. A lot of those are Iranian-designed drones now manufactured in Russia. So, Xi Jinping could call the end of the Ukraine war tomorrow if he put the pressure on Russia, but we know he won't do that. And so sadly, that's been a huge, huge piece of making this just that much harder. With his backing, Putin, who likes the war and still wants Ukraine, though he's never going to get it, but he feels he's able to continue this horrible fight.
And yet, President Trump has used a variety of unconventional means to rein in powers that are going wayward and causing chaos across the world. What other tactics potentially could the president use in this instance?
Well, he's on a long-term play with India with the new trade deal, hoping to, in his word, pivot India's oil purchases away from Russia. They still buy about 30% of Russia's oil and try to supply them more Venezuelan oil. Now, this may work out, but it's going to take time. So Trump will have to continue that economic pressure. There needs to be military pressure in the form of Ukrainian strikes on more legitimate Russian targets in Crimea and other locations. Of course, Ukraine has done strikes against Russian air bases, Russian energy infrastructure, and against bases that are used by the Russians to launch those horrible drone and missile attacks against Ukraine. We may need to see more of that in order to make Putin serious about a ceasefire.
And back on these peace talks, do you think China should be participating?
Well, if only they would help. But I think the key for the peace talks right now is to lock down U.S. security guarantees. And that means not only the economic prospects for Ukraine going forward, but the serious defense of Europe with Abrams tanks, with Patriot missiles, with U.S. command and control through NATO, because they could stop the guns in Ukraine tomorrow and Russia would still be a major threat. And if we see any advance in the Russian position, every advance by Russia in Ukraine is a danger to Europe. We're going to have to contain Russia for a long time. It's going to take a lot of American power with NATO to do that.
Watching it closely. Thank you so much, Rebecca Grant. Good to have you with us this morning.
Thank you.